repeated atrocities and killing innocent children, women, and women are cowardly, inhuman acts that demand the most severe punishment. We believe that India has failed to safeguard its citizens, which may compel to, that take up arms to defend themselves. Civilians should not be allowed to take up arms. Therefore, we appeal to the government to crack down on militant activities and respond quickly. The government's unwillingness to provide the exemplary punishment embolden the militants, and they have continued to commit the same crime, same atrocities since the conflict began in 2023. Whenever some semblance of peace is restored in the state, violence is soon perpetuated to keep the conflict alive. We want to know that who the invisible hand is that keeps the pot boiling. The government must fix a timeline to disarm all militant activities and their terror infrastructure in the hill, including the bunkers. So, is Indian military one of the world's most formidable forces, truly incapable of neutralizing these militants, or is it a deliberate policy to keep the Manipur boiling? Why the government is continuing the suspension of operation with the militants who are targeting or killing the innocents, not even fired a single bullet against India. So I'm asking to the media, or the requesting the media to explore what is the basis of this peace deal. So of course my colleagues that have already explained that all the issues on this. So we demand again, we also demand appropriate action against the CRPF personnel who killed the civilians and that injured many at Tronglaubi during the protest, or to punish the officer who ordered the incident or ordered the fire. So thank you very much for, I know that coming and that the hearing our voices, hearing our pain, and once again thank you.
Thank you everyone for your kind presence and listening to us speak. I think we are going to conclude here today this session. These are not very pleasant pictures and videos that we have just captured through our naked eyes. And this is something which is happening in reality. It may sound very distant when you go outside of that context. So I want to begin by saying that I'm not a media-trained speaker or neither an expert in political analysis. I speak as an ordinary human from a place of deep concern. I draw together what I have learned, what I have sought to understand and what many of us may already feel, even if we have not yet found the words. I had to prepare my speech because this is a very difficult and sensitive topic to address. While I'm speaking about this, I am already filled with so many mixed emotions that I can't express through words altogether. So I hope you bear with me. We gather today in the dark shadow of an unbearable loss. Two young children, just beginning their lives, taken from us in Manipur, a guerrilla-style RPG attack, widely suspected to have been carried out by armed Kuki militants, struck a civilian home in Tronglawi village in Bisnupur district, Manipur. The village lies barely a kilometer from a CRPF camp stationed between Meitei settlements and nearby Kuki-dominated hill areas. The attack occurred in the wee hours when the family was fast asleep. Inside the house were two children, two very young children. A 5-year-old infant, Yaisna, a beautiful name, meaning of Yaisna is a precious gold. She was recently brought back to Manipur for her Chawumba, which is a Nivala ceremony. She is yet to test her first solid food. And the other child is a 4 years old brother, Tomtin. Again, let's look at the meaning of the name. Tomtin means a ray of light. Both resting in their mother's arms. When the rocket bomb hit and exploded, the children were killed instantly. Their mother survived with severe injuries and was rushed to the hospital. Local residents were the first to respond, rushing to the site in an attempt to rescue the family, only to find the two children could not be saved. What raises deeper concern is this. Despite the proximity of the CRPF camps, there are serious questions about the absence of an immediate response to the blast. Accounts circulating suggest that the sound of such a powerful explosion did not prompt timely intervention. This incident is not only a tragedy, it demands urgent attention and accountability. As we all know by now, Manipur is a state of India that continues to experience recurring armed violence, a state that for many across the country feels distant geographically, politically, and emotionally. We must resist that distance today. Behind what we call an incident is a family whose life has been irrevocably altered. A mother lies in intensive care, severely injured, and we are left to wonder quietly, what does she hold onto in such a moment? The struggle to survive, the knowledge of losing her two little babies, or the worry of her destroyed home, or all of these in the same breath. We may not have answers, but we do have a responsibility to remain present in this loss and to recognize the human reality at the center of our discussion today. For many who are not directly connected to Manipur, what is unfolding may appear as a series of brief intermittent events, moments that barely enter national attention and then fade like footprints on wet sand. But for those living within it, this is not intermittent. It is continuous. It shapes how people navigate through their days, how they make decisions, how they imagine their futures. It becomes part of the background of life, quietly entering routines, relationships, and even silences. As Veena Das, a renowned anthropologist, reminds us, violence does not does not stay confined in the moment it occurs. It bleeds into everyday life. It is lived through gestures, hesitations, and what we cannot easily say. What happens appears from a distance as an event is, for those within it, an ongoing condition. It is carried not only in the memories, but it is in the very texture of daily life. This difference in perception, the lived reality versus the distant observation, must be taken seriously now. This is not a game, not a form of entertainment. Living continuously in a state of conflict turns every step into an obstacle to progress. It is within this gap that indifference quietly takes root, and once it does, violence stops shocking humans as it should be. The bomb blast, the gunfires, it doesn't shock people anymore. And I'll come to more details of why it doesn't happen. Speaking of the recent terrorizing attack by the suspected armed Kuki militants, the death of 2 little babies and the injured mother in a bomb blast, 3 protesters reportedly killed in gunfire from the CRPF security forces for protesting and raising their voices becomes something a distant observer noticed briefly and then moved past. To understand the loss we are addressing today, we must also situate it in time and specific contexts. The current phase of violence in Manipur did not begin yesterday. It escalated sharply in May 2023, as we all know, following tensions around land, identity, political recognition. What began as conflict over competing claims hardened into polarized narratives. Communities were increasingly framed as fixed opposing groups. Early media coverage simplified these tensions into binaries, majority versus minority, Hindu versus Christian. Over time, these framings hardened into sharper ethnic divides between the Meiteis and the Kukis. In these moments, narratives do not just describe reality. It shapes the reality. Stories of threats, victimhood, and retaliation circulated widely. They amplified fear and narrowed the space for dialogue. State authorities, on the other hand, did not intervene promptly to stop the chaos, or attempts fell short. Gradually, these narratives strengthened identities along lines of division, making coexistence seem almost impossible. Amid these narratives, certain voices recede, the voices of the most affected, the injured, the bereaved, the displaced, the internally displaced persons who lost their homes in relief camps are often overshadowed by social media stories and hostile narratives claiming to speak for them. Discussions often shift to historical, political context and policy debates. Responses are framed in representation of victims but are not always grounded in their lived realities. The state leadership resigned on February 5, 2025 after this cultivated ethnic violence escalated and armed groups mobilized alongside polarized narratives. No party could form a stable government, and the president's rule was imposed on February 9, 2025. We all know the details through whatever sources that we get from the internet. Disarmament became a state priority, but implementation was uneven. Security forces recovered a significant number of looted police weapons, including rifles and ammunition. Authorities called for voluntary surrender of arms. Meiteis, who took arms, citing community protection, largely complied. Armed groups in Kuki-dominated areas were less responsive, arguing that their weapons were not looted from state armories. No further enforcement measures were issued, allowing this group to operate with impunity. This incomplete disarmament fueled Meitei civilians' insecurity, fear of unpredictable attacks, and heightened anxiety in displacement camps and along community borders. The public paranoias and angers are organic psychological reactions to losses and griefs. This situation became fertile ground for suspicion towards central peace-building efforts. Even amid this fear and anger, there is a deep sense of care and love within the Meitei community, a bond that even in this intense emotional stage holds the possibility of peace. While central intervention deployed thousands of security personnel and administrative control, these were later reduced in early 2026 after a surface level decline in violence. The situation remained fragile, that only the directly affected Meitei villages can testify. As a Meitei speaker, I understand the responsibility to protect our community and identity. Yet, I urge that we must be cautious. Allowing fear and anger to dictate our actions risks perpetuating the cycle of violence. Thousands of displaced persons remain in precarious conditions, unable to return home safely. I also appeal to Kuki leaders and intellectuals to recognize the dangerous consequences of keeping armed groups alive and active. I actually had written active, but there are also some things that comes out of your mind. And we basically said that in psychology, whatever slips through your tongue also it carries some kind of unconscious wish. I'm not going into the detail of it. Beyond cycles of fear and anger, all communities in Manipur must remember that our choices are guided by conscience. This shared humanity must anchor us so that the fragile possibility of reconciliation is not lost. When arms remain alongside poles of peace, violence can re-emerge even after apparent calm. And this is what we have seen because weapons and arms persist. To name a few, even after official directives to surrender arms, attacks continued in Meitei villages near Kuki-dominated areas. In September 2024, a high-tech drone bombing in the Koltru village marked a new escalation, killing 2 civilians and injuring over 10. In the same year, another attack was carried out by the Kuki Militants in Moirang and killed a Meitei shaman. In November 2024 again, in Jiribam, women and children were abducted and killed, which we also saw in the video. In 2025, farmers were attacked. In their paddy fields, a man was shot in the hand, a woman shot, and later succumbed to death. Her last cry that we just heard, also have seen on the video, her last cry still echoes today. Am I going to die? Residents nearby the shootout areas abandoned their lands in fear of recurrence of such heavy armed violence. Although security forces have been deployed and have sometimes intervened to lower tensions, attempts remain unfruitful and farmers remain fearful of returning to their fields. In January 2026 again, Rishikanta Mayanglangbam was shot at point-blank range on an open public road in Churachandpur in the wee hours again. While visiting his Kuki wife, he was shot mercilessly, despite his plead with folded hands to spare his life. His plead was videotaped by the killers and kept viral to mock Meitei community. These killers have lost their conscience and sanity. They are dangerous to the Meitei society today, but they can also be dangerous, they can become dangerous to their own community, people, and others too. Their psychological delirium has reached a point for ordinary human to comprehend. We must understand that counting the dead cannot measure the sorrow of the living. Manipur occupies a very complex and often marginal position in the national imagination when reasons are not constantly attended to. Realities are understood only in fragments. Today, we focus our attention to what statistics cannot. Mothers mourning, families displaced, communities in fear, and invite the nation to witness the unfolding human reality in Manipur. The above mentioned incidents are not isolated events. They formed a pattern reigniting violence whenever normalcy seems to return. Some speak of invisible hands orchestrating the terrifying attacks and chaos. To many of us, it is not invisible. It is a deliberate blindfold worn by those in positions of responsibility for undisclosed reasons. In such context, violence does not always appear as a sudden rupture. It becomes patterned, something communities anticipate, adapt to, and sometimes must live alongside. For children and youth, these conditions are particularly severe. Their early experiences are shaped not by secure facilitative environment, but by shocks, fear, hatred, and precariousness. This sense of safety, so fundamental to development and self-growth for the young generation, is now filled with hopelessness, doubts, and confusions. They are exposed to even greater risk. In the long run, these affects our self-development and the ways they relate to the world. It is within this context that deaths of these two young children that we are focusing today must be understood. Their loss is not only a tragedy, it reflects conditions which are allowed to persist in the context of Manipur. Perhaps it is from this shared uneven human understanding that we can begin to close the distance between the lived realities and the distant observation. What is at stake is not only the present moment, but the longer shaping of social and psychological life. This is why responses must move beyond immediacy. Accountability remains essential. Acts of violence must be addressed transparently, fairly, and promptly. But alongside accountability, there is also a need for sustained engagement. Security is not only about control. It involves rebuilding trust, supporting communities, and addressing conditions that allow violence to occur. Listening to the suffering of the communities is central. The people of Manipur are not distant subjects. They are individuals with lived knowledge of their own realities. Their voices must shape the responses. We must also recognize the ongoing psychological impact. Anger, fear, loss do not fade quickly. As one of the renowned psychologists says, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, in her book on death and dying, responses to grief and trauma often shape through 5 stages. The first is denial, second is anger, third is bargaining, then comes depression, and then acceptance. It is a very long process. Psychologically, it's a very slow process to understand grief. In Manipur today, denial seems to hold little space because loss is no longer unexpected. We may be uncertain about the timing of loss, but losing life is no longer a surprise. It has become a reality. It has become a part of the normal life. Instead, many civilians remain in the state of anger as they have been repeatedly denied the time and clarity needed to process their own grief over multiple times. This is a complexity that I cannot fully capture here today. However, I like to flag that addressing these stages of grief and trauma requires sustained care, especially for younger generations. Finally, there is a broader responsibility we all share, particularly those who shape public narratives. We must resist emotional distance as humans. We must remain attentive, even when events are not immediately visible. What appears peripheral is, in fact, central to the lives of many. Ultimately, this is not only about Manipur. It is about how we understand human connection, responsibility, and belonging within a shared national space. Are we able to hold realities not immediately our own within our concern? Are we able to respond not only to crises, but to conditions that precede them? These are not easy questions, but they are necessary. As we reflect on the recent loss of 2 young children, perhaps the most meaningful response is not only to mourn, but to remain engaged. To continue asking, to continue listening, and to continue paying attention. And let this not remain distinct. Thank you.